I'd like to invite Catherine David on stage for a closing address. Catherine is one of the co-curators for the exhibition Reframing Modernism, and she is also the Deputy Director of the National Museum of Modern Art of the Centre Pompidou in Paris.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank very much my colleagues from the National Gallery for inviting me again to share with you the many informations and ideas and analyses which have been brought today in this one-day seminar. I'm not sure I'm the most qualified here for wrapping up. I will try to do my best in order to articulate my notes and a certain number of very important elements which have been brought up today. I'm not the most probably qualified because I'm not a specialist of Southeast Asia, which I know very superficially, and this exhibition was a very great opportunity to get closer to a certain number of artists and works. And I am more familiar with Latin American art and culture and Arab worlds. I put always this cultural reality with an S, Arab worlds, because I have more and more problems with people mixing up North Africa with Middle East and Middle East with the Gulf, which are definitely, which have very different cultures, geographies, and political momentum. But I think that I'm used to navigate between different cultures, and I would remember that I did my university work on Wilfredo Lam, who is probably one of the most exemplary artists of the 20th century as a transnational and transcultural artist, an artist who was born in Cuba, who was formed as an artist and as a man, as a human being in Spain, who would have settled in Spain without the civil war, who went to France, where, yes, he met Picasso, but right after, because of the war, he went back to Cuba. And I think that we could maintain the idea that, yes, Picasso was a very important meeting in the life of Wilfredo Lam, probably also for the development of his work, but as much important were Cuban intellectuals from the 40s, like the magnificent writer José Lezama Lima, like Lidia Cabrera and Fernando Ortiz, two major anthropologists who defined the notion of cultural entropy, and much before Edouard Glissant and the Two Mondes. So I think that, and I could go on, Wilfredo Lam, after leaving Cuba and living more between Paris and Venezuela and Italy at the end of his life, or not the end, last 25 years of his life, and being also very close to a major, complex, transcultural artist as well as Guyon. So I think that for these reasons, I'm not too badly equipped for agreeing with Partha Mitra, the Indian art historian, on the fact that we should really get rid of what he called the Picasso monkey syndrome. I get that you know, because it's very familiar in this zone of the globe. And for those who are not acquainted with the syndrome of Picasso monkey, Partha wanted to refer to the first analysis of English critics at the end of the 19th century, when they were looking, and beginning of the 20s, when they were looking at the modern, or the beginning of Indian modern art, and always either disqualifying the painters when they were too bad, they were not able to copy well, they were not able to do it correctly, or disqualify them when it was too good, they were like monkey. So you had the choice, either you were a monkey in a full mimicry of what you would receive from Europe, or you would be absolutely incapable and wrong. And of course, the solution is not in between, but the solution is more in trying to figure out, and I think it's something we will keep, I think, all along this very short wrapping up. What you have to keep in mind is the cultural and formal paradigm which is invented, which is proposed by artists who are deciding at a certain moment and in a certain context, and of course in certain mental and psychic conditions, to develop this or that set of formal decisions and ideas. And this is true for Picasso, this is true for Hangso, we saw this morning, and for most of the artists who are in the exhibition upstairs. So this is one point. This, of course, we worked a lot through this, for coming to this exposition and exhibition, and for me it was very important to, once the exhibition was installed, so it's always easier than when you are working, when you're on the way, it was very interesting to look at this Reframing Modernism exhibition in parallel to the Declaration Then Dream exhibition, which is an historical exhibition dealing only with artists coming from Southeast Asia, and which was, of course, showing in a much more I don't know if challenging, but convincing way, the dynamics, the idiosyncrasies of the artist formal and ideas proposal in the region. So I think that, of course, when you have the opportunity to look at this both, it's not opposed, but it's two different ways of working. It seems to me that the way I looked at Reframing Modernism, of course, I was much more interested in Southeast Asian artists because I knew, or I thought I knew, which is another another thing, another level of the possible discussion. I thought I knew better the artists coming from the National Museum of Modern Art collection, and I think that on this level, it was quite easy for me as a visitor to really enter into the works and trying to articulate a certain number of reflections and putting a minimum order in this corpus. So this meaning that we should be more open and not systematically thinking that as soon as a work is coming from what we understand as a non-Euro-American space, it is by definition difficult and ununderstandable, and it will stay opaque to the majority of our audiences, which I don't think it's true. Of course, when we come to this point, what this exhibition is proposing, as many, or not many, a certain number of other ones which have been proposed in the last 20 years, has to do with a very obvious enlargement of the modern and modernist corpus, a new interest for local regional modernism, and of course, doing that, it's quite clear to me that Europe becomes a region, maybe not a province, as the other said years ago, but Europe, or what John Clark identified as Euro-American work, and works are one element, regional proposal. And if you look at the whole development of modernism and working on this very specific corpus, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's this or that country or region of South America, or the same for Arab worlds, you realize that de facto what has been too fast understood as Euro-America and the West and the rest is de facto a much more complex world, full of traveling, full of exchanges, full of negotiations. And I think Wilfried Olam would be a wonderful example, but you could find examples much before his time. And here I think that maybe one option would be to work more and more close to historians who redefined history as a connected history. In French, we say l'histoire connectée, and it's, of course, a concept which was brought by Subramanian, and which has been really followed in a very interesting way in France by an historian, a younger historian, who is Romain Bertrand, who had a wonderful work on the Lusitanian Empire and cultural development from the late 15th century on. So this is not new, that art history, and maybe more specifically the modern art history, has been full of transnational and transcultural exchanges, which would be very visible if and more accessible if we were a little bit obsessed with the ideas of center periphery, with the mainstream, moments and movements, and looking more carefully. I could take many examples. I will take one, as we spoke a lot today of Paris as a major center, which is not completely true, because if you look at different artists' bios from the 20s on, and it's even accelerating in the 30s and 40s, when it comes to artists coming from Arab worlds, for instance, you would notice that many of them are I leave aside the French colony, which was Algeria and North Africa. But if you think about the more global Arab world, you will see that many artists would study at the time more in Italy, in Rome. This is true for major artists like Al-Ghazali in Egypt. This is true for the first generation of Iraqi artists, and so on and so forth. So when you look more carefully, you will see that at times when, of course, you have some mainstream, and at a time when everybody is focusing on École de Paris, you have at the same time a group like GRAVE, Groupe de Recherche en Art Visuel, which was an absolutely transnational and transcultural group, including François Morellet, including Venezuelan artist, I don't remember the name at the moment, I couldn't find it in my computer. And these people were working in Paris in the mid-60s, developing very unconventional kinds of performances and forms of exhibitions, and were absolutely contemporary of École de Paris. So I think that the more we look carefully to who were in Paris or in Rome or in Berlin, what people were doing, you see that the map is very contrasted, and really showing that this map we always considered as center periphery, major capitals and the rest, is in fact from inside, from when you depart from the major capitals, full of cosmopolitan, transnational and transcultural exchanges. And the point is now to, and it's quite interesting and encouraging to see a younger generation of students and researchers beginning to identify and to analyze this diversity, this complexity, this heterogeneities of the modern and modernist moment in what was supposed to be the center capitals. When you see what's happening now, there is also, for reasons which are interesting and other less, but everything is connected in a way, the corpus of, and the interest and the corpus of modern and modernist works coming from very different geocultural places in the world is due to a market phenomenon, meaning that a certain kind of elite collectors from the different regions have been disappointed with contemporary art, or disappointed with what happened to the market after 2008, and concentrating now more on local modern artists. So if it would be just that, of course, it won't be necessarily a very good new, but it's coming with and it's a kind of perverse connection, but it's coming with the development of research and kind of complexification of the accessible corpus. And it's something you can really notice in many Arab countries, and what you can see probably in many other geocultural places. Of course, when you begin to identify the more and more works and complexities, I think that the effect is to make you even more aware of the, and I think it's what is probably the most exciting in our work, of the social and aesthetical values of modernism. So, you know, the modernism which has been so often, in a way, caricatured as a collection of ism, as a collection of preconceived formal decisions, has been de facto a very heterogeneous and sometimes very conflictive set of social and aesthetical proposals, which are which it is very important today to excavate in certain circumstances, or in circumstances which have been more favorable to the visibility and the circulation of the works, to make accessible for larger audiences and consideration. And of course, when we go now to the, and I think what was also very interesting in the process of working on this exhibition is that instead of working out of big movements and trying to find who was a possible Saucer Station cubist or a possible Saucer Station abstract and so on and so forth, most of the work has been, and it's of course, I'm very grateful for that, has been to work on very specific artists, to really to look at works, to think about biographies, to think about life, circumstances, to think in terms of political and social adversity and so on and so forth. And when you work this way, you can see that what happened in your own, or what is supposed to be your own, because I really don't know what is my own cultural circumstance at the end of the day, but what is supposed to be your Western department or cultural space is also much more heterogeneous and paradoxical and conflictive than we would expect when we just follow the wonderful clean order of the great movements. So of course, when you look at both artists coming from the West and Southeast Asia, even so, we already know that the map is much more complex than that, and you might have a certain number of circulations of human beings, ideas, forms, which are extremely diverse. You have to really look at the heterogeneity, or to consider the extreme in the modern, the de facto, the heterogeneity of the corpuses of works, of course, of forms, of trajectories. And when you do that, when you really try to consider seriously very different formal and cultural proposals, you come to the point that a certain set of tools we are still using, sometimes without thinking twice, like figuration versus abstraction, is maybe not the ideal way of considering the works, and we might pay more attention to language, to the text, to the literary world and imagination of the artist, coming from very different cultures. And of course, the Arab modern moment is absolutely full of works which have been developed not out of formal models, but more out of textual, literary models. And you have one very great part of the first half of 20th century, especially in Iraq, works which have been developed through poetry, text, and which are relating to, first of all, to textual realities. When you work this way, I think that you understand, or you can understand quite soon that, it's, we mentioned this morning the question, the problem of the nation as a space, the nation as a context for, if not understanding, locating the works. And I think that when you work very carefully, you see that the nation is maybe one element of a larger and much more complex issue, which is the question of idiosyncrasies. And I think that by idiosyncrasies, I mean all the elements which are entering into the constitution of an artwork, which are related to a specific number of knowledge, sensations, memories, which are belonging to the place or the group or the moment the artist has been living in. And of course, idiosyncrasies are not easy to catch when you have no notion of what happened in the context. It takes time, but you can always work, and you have always the possibility to speak with the people, to look to anthropological books and so on and so forth. And when it comes to this very complex set of idiosyncrasies, of course, it's related to potential dyschronies, meaning what's happening here is not happening at the same time it's happening in another context, but this doesn't mean that there is somebody delayed. And I think that we have to be very careful about the dyschronies and the momentum, and it's very important to understand that when an artist's work is proposing formal and cultural paradigm, the meaning is this work makes sense, hic et nunc, because of what happened before and because of what might happen after. And this has nothing to do with it's before or it's after. And I think we should really stop with this kind of considerations. And I don't think it's so complicated to get rid of this kind of it's for bicycles, who is first, but not for culture and artworks. It's also very important to understand that artists are sometimes working in very different time spaces, and you have to deal with that, and you have to understand what it means and how it works. And maybe one way, and it's also a few works in the exhibition are quite helping on this level, one way of understanding the very complex negotiation between idiosyncrasies and a possible more global understanding, or I don't like the word universal because I never really believed in universal, but let's say a more global understanding of what began as the very strong idiosyncrasies are the works, the activity, what has been made possible by artists or intellectuals, in this case artists. I would identify it. I know it's a word which is very difficult to translate in English. Passeur. Passeur is the one who is taking you, the thing from one side of the river to the other, who is taking you from one reality to another one. And so Passeur, in this exhibition, you have, for instance, the very intriguing and interesting figure of Covarrubias. And of course, when you begin to work very precisely in very specific geocultural zones of the modern, you will identify a certain number of key passeurs. And when you really begin to work seriously, you realize that you have many more artists who worked in this situation of passeur, really departing from one place to another and transforming ideas, forms, and sometimes in a very, very, in many ways in their life. I was speaking before with a colleague, and unfortunately I don't remember the name of the artist. It's somewhere in the depths of my computer. I was reading a few weeks ago an article on a German artist who went to Mexico in times of muralismo. He was absolutely impressed by the physicality, by the intensity of the Mexican frescoes, and from a certain number of reasons, after he went to New York, and he became very familiar with the people working in the dynamic of the Harlem Renaissance, and he converted certain forms he inherited from Mexican muralism into using the theme, or the main themes of Harlem Renaissance. So, and Harlem Renaissance would be also, it's maybe not the topic of today, but I think it's a wonderful example of a moment, a cultural moment and a cultural movement, a cultural dynamic at least, which has been much more international than we expected, and where you see a certain number of artists who are not American and not even black, if I might say, who are participating to an emancipatory movement, and sometimes taking the black issue as one element of the radical demand, in a way. So now I would like to come to maybe which is in a way part of. So yeah, what I wanted to add is that in this situation I exposed, and of course we would be well inspired to follow the path of our colleagues historian working on connected history, histoire connectée in plural, of course. And we would, I think that it's quite obvious that in the last 30 years, most of the importations have been done in the field of non-Euro-American moderns, and not only the main importations have been done not only by art historians, but also, and mainly I would say, by cultural critics who are able to deal with anthropological knowledge, which are able to deal with historical knowledge, which are able to deal with psychoanalytical notion, etc., etc. And now I would like to come to a point which is, even if difficult a little bit I feel responsible for, and it's a little bit part of my business. How do we manage when we, knowing that we have to deal more and more with an enlarged modern and modernist corpus, with works coming from very different geocultural spaces in the world? How do we manage in collections, and which have been conceived in a moment and under in situations where the vision was very different, when the history of the collections was very different? How do you manage? And here, I mean, I can also, there is one point I also find important to underline, is that this notion of Musée d'Art Moderne, the Museum of Modern Art, which has been, in a way, always taken for granted in the whole discussion about modernity and modernism. And this Museum of Modern Art, taken as a model, is, when you look at the reality and the many situations in many different geocultural places, you realize that this model, which has been sold to us in a way as a model, is, as a rule, is in fact very often an exception. So I'm not even speaking about major Western modern collections like MoMA or like the National Museum of Modern Art in Paris, which are absolutely impossible to do, again, to repeat for two major reasons. One, money, and even worse, the availability of the works. And in this case, I think it's a little bit irresponsible to believe that you can all of a sudden change the DNA of your collection, which was built under certain historical conditions, under certain political conditions, under certain national conditions, and so on and so forth, that you can transform. I'm not even sure it makes sense to fight for a transformation of the DNA. I think anyway it's impossible, and I am absolutely opposed to any what I call a tutti frutti, one of each. So you buy one Indian, one of this. I think it's absolutely, it doesn't work, and it was a little bit the problem some of my colleagues and myself had, and I was not part of the team at the time. I was just the visitors, but it's a part of the problem some of my colleagues and myself had when the Modernité Plurielle exhibition was installed in the museum, because I don't think that it's solving the problem to have one Iranian, one Algerian, one I don't know what, and all together in Oriental modern. I mean, there is nothing like Oriental modern. Or if there is something like that, it's bad. So we have to be very careful. And in that case, I think it's probably more appropriate to work very carefully in what I was mentioning before, the cosmopolitan, and in that case, of course, in Paris, we are the museum till new advice is in Paris, to be much more careful and attentive to the development of cosmopolitan, transnational, and transcultural exchanges in the 20s, in the 30s, and up till now, and which were largely ignored. And you have a certain number of very interesting artists who are not in the collection and who lived in Paris for many years. I'm working at the moment on a few Indian cases with my friend and colleague Sumesh Sharma, and we are really discovering amazing corpus of works which have been never shown in Paris at least. But it could be one option, and of course, this, it's not even an option. It's absolutely necessary now to question, to permanently question, to have a dialectical relationship to a collection, inviting on a temporarily but regularly collections, monographies, group shows. Of works which are not part of the collection, or works which were developed in very different parts of the world. And in that case, it's absolutely impossible these days. You know, even if you want to buy 10 Bupen-Kaka, I'm afraid we have not the money, and we don't even have the works, the very strong ones, if you want to give a coherent idea of the development of Bupen work, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really what could be done in order to make people aware that the model is not, we have to discuss the model, we have to complexify, and you have to make people aware not only of the diversity, of the heterogeneity of the modernist moment, but also for when you are responsible for such a big collection, to make people aware of the many ways artists and people had in the 20th century and before, but the museum is dealing with 20th century, to build collections. You had community collections, you had religious collections, you had collections organized by people who were taking care for works which would be lost for that in war situations and so on and so forth. So to make people aware of the, again, the heterogeneity of the 20th century modern and modernist corpus, but also of the diversity, the complexity of the collecting activity and attitude. And I'm not a fetishist, so I think it's very important to collect, but you collect for what? You collect, some people for capitalizing, but it's not what I'm interested in. Basically, major museums and a certain number of very important collectors, and a very easy way of defining. You have the, in French I say les collectionneurs spéculateurs, the speculator collectioner, and the people I still call collectionneurs. And I knew a certain number of amazing collectionneurs. I think they are very important, and I would like to keep this kind of endangered species alive for a longer time. So the point when the collection is, of course, first of all, for preserving the works, but as important for transmitting, for making individuals, people, groups of people aware and able to share and able to understand and able to revise eventually certain ideas they might have. So I think that what we are doing is not just for being nice and occupying our time in a pleasurable way, but we have a responsibility on these issues. And as I'm in Singapore, and I would say the same in Bombay, and I'm always saying that when I'm in many cities and countries of the Arab world where very few things are done, which is not the case here, there is, of course, in this panorama, in this situation, a very strong responsibility for national collections. Meaning, if people are not taking care of their heritage, of the modern heritage, and in Arab world, I say the modern tradition, because some people still believe that there is no modernity in the Arab world, which would be another discussion. When the people are not taking care of the heritage, in the proper place of invention of this heritage. I don't think it's the paper of MoMA or Beaubourg or whoever to take care. I think it's very important. We are all responsible, and I think we are all enjoying to share more and more complex works. But it's very important that in terms of collecting, in terms of making available, in terms of preserving the works, each one is really doing its job. And I think that maybe one very important issue in the last 30 to 50 years is that you have a very strong commitment coming from a local, whether it's national, or it can be, you have many different ways of dealing with collections. So I don't think there is one rule. You have many ways, but that there is, you see more responsibility in many different geocultural places for acknowledging and taking care of the modern and modernist heritage, which I think absolutely capital if we want to go on working. And of course, we are very welcome to help. We are very welcome to make possible archive. It's also a major issue when you are working in certain situations where there is, even in Lebanon, it's been hell to work with certain archives. So whenever you can really contribute to the more respect for the works, more respect for the archive, and contributing to have certain corpuses or papers or memories or images kept in better conditions. I think it's we are all responsible. And I'm French, I don't care, or this is for the Lebanese. I think it's a global responsibility. So I think I could probably forgot one or two things, but I think I could end with this, if not optimistic, realistic constatation.
Thank you, Catherine. And on that note, we've come to the end of the symposium. Thank you so much, panelists, speakers, and audience members. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you, and have a good evening ahead.